Okay, so we are now recording. I just switch to my slides. It should be on the screen. Yep. Okay, so welcome everyone to our weekly call. And before we sort of kick off, thank you to our sponsors, DNS-OARC, particularly topical this week, as you'll see in a moment, for supporting the call. So by way of an agenda, our main focus, we're going to have a look at some of the things that look interesting on the agendas of both the OARC 46 and RIPE 92 meetings. And then, as always, sort of depending on time, we spend a little bit of time looking at stuff that's happened over the last week or so, stuff that's coming up, etc. So apologies in advance, I may be doing quite a lot of talking. If you've got questions or comments, put them in the chat or raise your virtual hand. And if I, for some reason, don't appear to notice that, just unmute and sort of say something, and I'll be aware then that you want to interject. And I just realised I can't now see the mini camera images, so I need to move that around my screen so it's not obscured by the chat, which I've now done. Okay, right, so that's the plan for the call. So getting straight to it, firstly, OARC 46 kicks off sort of on Friday of this week, which is with Friday evening, a mentor mingle for new attendees, which starts at 6 p.m. local time on Friday for a couple of hours or so. That's in a local restaurant with some would-be mentors. And then the event proper, as I'm sure you all know, is on Saturday and Sunday at the Edinburgh International Conference Centre. The detailed agenda that I'm going to be referencing is available, and when I share the slides, if you haven't already seen it, you can just click on that link to get to it. When I checked earlier today, there 170 people were registered, 157 on site and 13 remote. Which I think means it will be the biggest OARC in terms of on-site attendees, which is marvellous. It also means I think it's going to be fairly snug in the on-site, because originally I think they were planning for something like 140, so they've added some extra chairs somehow, reconfigure the tables, whatever, to fit us all in, which is great. And also there's a social on Saturday evening, but you do need to register for the social and get a ticket through Eventbrite. And again, I'll share the slide with the link if you haven't got it already, and you can also do that from the OARC 46 website. So do definitely get a ticket for the social, because I'm sure that will be fun, and I've no doubt there will be sort of suitable refreshments. And it'd be sort of a fun evening. Okay, so what I've done is to pick out from morning and afternoon on the 2 days a couple of things that look interesting. Caveat, not all of the agenda items when I looked earlier today had the slides, so it was hard to tell whether they'd be interesting. I'm sure they all are. So I'm going to focus primarily on those where slides were available to give at least a reasonably informed opinion rather than a pure guess. For example, you'll see towards the bottom of this slide, I imagine the Underminer presentation that David's going to be giving will be fabulous, but I didn't have the slides to validate that. So if I don't mention something, it's not because I don't like it, it's because I couldn't tell, just so we're clear. But things I thought were interesting, Andreas is giving a presentation 10:20 on what keeps enterprises up at night. Just see, Andreas isn't on the call at the moment. Anyway, I flicked through that. without giving the game away, I think risk does definitely come into it. But yeah, it looked like an interesting presentation. And I'd not seen it before that particular take. So yeah, good to see that. And then perhaps a slightly more traditional, if that's the right phrase, presentation I'll put out later on mitigation of DNS cache poisoning attacks. So a proposed technique for handling those. You'll see at 12:30 to 12:45, so quite a short sort of presentation. And in fact, yeah, as a reminder, as a rule, I think all of the presentations are sort of pretty much 15 or 25 minutes, so they tend to be fairly punchy presentations at OARC. I think the programme committee sort of take the view of trying to cover as much ground as possible rather than going in depth in the topics. But anything that's super interesting, we can always spend some more time on this call revisiting if that's useful. So bear that in mind over the weekend. If you want to dwell more on something, let me know and I'll see if we can get the presenter to do so, as David has already preemptively agreed to that, for example, with the Underminer presentation. So that's two things from me from the sort of Saturday morning. And as I said, if anyone else wants to jump in, feel free to do so. Just raise your virtual hand or just unmute and talk if you think I've missed something significant that warrants more attention. But if you don't, I will plough on. So in the afternoon, again, I sort of cheated because two of the presentations in my mind are obviously related. So I've got three things. First is DNSSEC at scale. And Jens is telling us about enabling signing across, I think it's 5,500 or is it 6,500? No, 5,500 domains. So how to scale up DNSSEC signing. Which seemed to me to be worth listening to. I've also topically, Roy is giving a presentation on the root key rollover, which has caused a few issues on key rollovers of late, as we come on to when we get to the news headlines. But anyway, and then in the afternoon, as I say, 2 for 1. Yevgenia is talking about ADOC's deployment in the real world. She posted on that a few weeks ago. We did talk about it on this call, so she's presenting on it at sort of later on in the afternoon on Saturday. And then immediately afterwards, Sarah is talking about opportunistic ADOT deployment, the forgotten big win. I think she's focusing on ADOT as she did on this call again a few weeks ago. Because
it's not a particularly attractive little town.
Apologies, did I just drop out then? I think I did.
You did.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry about whether that was the tea finally having an impact. I've no idea. Right, give me a second whilst I rejig things. Apparently I'm still recording, which is quite impressive.
You stopped and started again, Andrew.
Right. Right, let's just... I'm just going to resend, put the chat where I can see it. That's the main problem when you drop out and it suddenly everything disappears. Okay, and I'll reshare my slides. Right, hopefully you can see my slides again. Have I reshared the slides?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, no, we can see them.
Yeah, thanks. Where did I drop out? Did I mention about ADOT deployment?
you're just going on to that.
Okay, right, thanks, Pete. Right, so we got ADOC's deployment in the wild with Yevgenia, and I know she's done some measurements of how prevalent it is, and then Sarah will follow on from that with opportunistic ADOT deployment specifically. That's based on the findings or the observation she'd already made, which I think is supported by Yevgenia's measurements, that ADOT in particular, as opposed to DOQ, it seems to be DOT is the most prevalent choice at the moment. So she'll talk about that. Okay. But as you can see, there's a lot of other good stuff on the agenda throughout Monday. So it's going to be quite a busy day. And then we got, as I mentioned earlier, we got the social in the evening on Saturday. And then on Sunday, we got bright yellow on the agenda, probably to wake everyone up after a busy night. Two things I pulled out from the morning session. First one, a presentation on an empirical study of flawed domain registry operation, which looked interesting. It was sort of seemed to be highlighting issues with, as the name said, domain registry operation, some of which highlighted potential openings for malicious actors. So always a good thing to focus on potential abuses of different sorts. So I believe that will sort of be teased out in the that presentation. And then the other one I highlighted purely because it's the first one that seems to overtly reference AI. So it does, the slides aren't available, so I broke my own rule on that. But unlike many other conferences recently, most of the titles for the presentations for OARC don't have AI in the title, but this one does. So, but the slides aren't available, so that whether it's interesting or not, I don't know. But I think it deserves a prize for sort of getting AI in. Perhaps more usefully in the afternoon, Remy is giving a presentation on measuring Anycast routing, and that's a topic which I think is also picked up in RIPE, I think. Well, you'll see on that in a moment. I'm pretty sure that there was a similar theme there on Anycast routing, and then also on the Sunday afternoon, we got half an hour set aside for lightning talks. And assuming the programme committee take the same line they have previously, then the deadline for submission to lightning talks will be the Saturday afternoon. So the agenda for that will be quite fluid. So if you've got something you want to talk about for 5 minutes or thereabouts, yeah, you've got, I think, until double check this, but I'm pretty sure it's Saturday afternoon to bid for a slot. But I think they're only 5 minutes, so they have to be really very short, even for OARC. It's just to give a flavour for what you're interested in. It's a bit like the equivalent sessions at IETF on the Sunday evening. So it's just to get a flavour of something and potentially follow it up with a more detailed presentation at a later date. Okay. But before I move on, does anyone have anything else you want to say about OARC? Otherwise, I'll move seamlessly on to RIPE on the Monday. I'll take silence as no, in which case let's talk about Monday. So RIPE then follows immediately on in the same venue. It's a different location within the venue, so don't go. If you're attending both, don't go on autopilot to the same room, because I presume it would be empty or have other stuff in it, but it's certainly in the same building. Monday through Friday of next week, same venue, as I said, the agenda's available. Again, when I checked this morning, 643 registered to attend on site and 179 remotely. So hopefully a rather bigger room than OARC, otherwise it really would be a squeeze. In terms of socials, plural, Monday evening between 7 and 9 p.m. there's a welcome reception on site at the conference centre. Tuesday there's a networking event between 9 p.m. and 1 a.m. But remember, it is only Tuesday, so don't peak too early and stay there till 1 p.m. So 1 a.m. rather. And then Thursday there's the ripe dinner between 8 p.m. and 1 a.m. But you do need a ticket for the dinner, which you can do through the registration. So if you want to go to the dinner and haven't got a ticket, make sure you do that before you get there. So go back through and see if there's any availability for tickets. But that should be good, I'm sure. So 3 social things. Not forgetting also we do this call next Monday somewhere in the conference centre when I can find a room we can borrow for an hour. So we'll be doing that on site, the usual time, also on Monday the 18th. Right, so in terms of the agenda, I just pulled again a few things out from each day, just to again give you a flavour of what's happening. First thing on the Monday, it doesn't really start properly till the Monday afternoon. I guess to allow people to fly in. So in the morning between 11 and 12, there is a newcomer's introduction followed by a newcomer's lunch. So if you want to go, if you're new to RIPE, do take advantage of that. Good networking opportunity very early in the week. Then through the afternoon, 2 things I'd pulled out from the plenary. There's about half dozen sort of different sessions in the plenary, but 2 that stood out to me. One is there's a presentation on Net UK, which is, I think, in its 3rd year, so it's not new as such, but it took over from UK NOF a couple of years or so ago. Hi everyone, apologies. I think my Nord VPN, for some reason, is playing up. No idea why, but I will try and switch it off if I can. But other than that, please bear with me. Apologies for dropping out a couple of times. Right, sorry, let me go back to sharing those slides. Right. Right, sorry, as I say, a Net UK presentation, and also there's a BOF at 6 p.m. Where Drew from the IAB is talking about the sort of link between the ITF and RIPE, so all part of the IAB's outreach. So he's given sort of similar presentations at ICANN and elsewhere, so it's good to see that continuing here as well. So those are the 2 things that stood out for me from the first day, the sort of second plenary plus the BOF.
Andrew, I've got a question on the BOF. You may not know the answer to this, but somebody might. When there's a BOF at an IETF, it's usually with some aim of trying to form a working group or something like that. Does this BOF have an aim, or is it just informational?
I think this one is just informational, but if anyone else thinks differently, please do chime in. And I don't know with RIPE if they have a sort of that sort of same reasonably formal process in quite the same way. I've never really looked into it, to be fair.
I mean, there definitely is a process for forming a new working group, but not many get formed at RIPE, so I'm not sure what that is off the top of my head, but there definitely is one.
Yeah.
No worries. I won't be at RIPE on Monday, but I'll watch the recording afterwards and see what the crack is.
Yeah. Yeah, good question, though. I might ask some questions about that while I'm there next week, since you mentioned it. And as also I mentioned, by the way, 4 p.m. We will be doing this call there next week, and I will have dealt with my VPN configuration before then. So for the rest of the week, again, I've just pulled things out. I'm not going to read all of these out. It'd take far too long. It'd be deadly dull for all of you. But for the plenary on Tuesday, the first plenary, there's a bit about identity privacy and location privacy with IPv6, which struck me as an interesting topic, which I've not seen covered previously. So that caught my eye. And then IPv6 in the DNS presentation in the afternoon plenary, which Tobias, I think he's from the Max Planck Institute, if I remember rightly, is giving. And then some other stuff, but I think certainly about copyright and cybercrime from security. You can see for some of the agenda, if you're not familiar with how RIPE works, you do have some working group sessions running in parallel. So you've got the plenaries, which don't compete with anything, and then the working group sessions, which do from time to time. So do bear that in mind. So you have to make some choices which you most prefer. Both of them, both Matt and security, do have some interesting things in them. Probably lean towards security for my preference, but yours may vary. Similarly, on the Wednesday, you've got, as you can see, Connect and open source first thing, routing and cooperation after that in the morning. There's a presentation from Nominate colleagues on the DNS fund and obviously open source in the case of the first round of the Nominate fund. So that was good to see. And also about vibe coding and Bird, which I'm curious to hear that. And then from cooperation, Mike Blanche is talking about the sort of the Digital Networks Act, which there'll be some grumbling in the audience, I'm sure about that. Not because of the presentation, but I think that some of the RIPE community are very libertarian focused, and I think would disagree with the whole concept of the Digital Networks Act in principle. So there may be some grumbling from that. And then from RIPE NCC Services, something which I'm a blast for the past for me is the public enum. And whether E164.ARPA is to be withdrawn, but that may not be of interest to anyone apart from me, but good to know that I'm catered for.
I think it's interesting because I used to run 4.4.E164.ARPA.
Oh, well, there you are then. There'll be two of us in the audience then.
Yeah.
You remotely, potentially, Brett, and me there. Yeah. Okay, looking at Thursday, who wouldn't want to go to talk on IP address space for outer space? Seems like a good thing to talk about in address policy, but of course that is competing with the DNS working group, which has got a bunch of things on it, including the 3 that I've put in there, but there's at least a couple more topics being covered as well. So I think for probably most of the people on this call, that's the thing you're most likely to want to go along to between 11 and 12:30 on Thursday. So yeah, that's definitely always sort of pretty content rich, and they'll probably struggle to cover everything if there's some other stuff as well in the available time. And then in the afternoon, in the IoT working group, amongst other things, they're looking at IoT DNS security and privacy guidelines with so Jim Mosley is giving an update on that. He's talked about that on this call previously, as well as at RIPE. And then again, for AI finding its way onto the agenda late on Thursday with a practical AI buff, which could actually be quite a useful buff. Looking at how it can be used by network engineers for real world applications. which again sort of begs the question, going back to Brett's question earlier about whether the boss lead on to stuff, which would be interesting to see if there's an intent for this one to go further as a topic, or if it's a one-off. And then finally on Friday, 2 plenaries. First one all about happy eyeballs, as well as lightning talks. So 30 minutes of lightning talks in the first plenary. And then post-quantum cryptography finds its way onto the agenda at the very last, again, along with some more lightning talks in the which will be pretty much towards the very end of the agenda, and then we sort of have lunch, and that closes off the whole of RIPE. So plenty to get your teeth into. And yeah, I see Vicky in the chat. Yeah, DNS Tapir at the Centre Jamboree last week, and I'm trying to get the team onto this call. We're just struggling to find a date that works, but hopefully in June they'll be coming on here as well to talk about how they're broadening out the applicability of Tapir beyond Swedish ISPs. Yeah, we have some sort of further conversations on that. Anyway, that's it for the very, very quick sort of run through of things on the OARC and RIPE agendas. There's quite a lot on the two of them. It's going to be a busy 7 days if you're there for the duration. But then, yeah, with a number of sort of networking, sort of socialising opportunities as well. So it should be a good week. Having said that, weather forecast is, but make sure you have some wet weather gear for going out and about whilst in Edinburgh at the moment. It's warmish, but plenty of opportunities for rain based on the forecast I saw this lunchtime for next week. So do bear that in mind. Don't whip, just bring shorts and t-shirts or you might be disappointed. Okay, right, swiftly moving on then onto just stuff that's happened over the last week. Firstly, a good discussion David had with Cricket on the future of the DNS, and both backwards looking, see how it's developed, as well as then looking forwards on things like zero trust DNS inevitably, which I think seems like the likely direction to certainly for protecting enterprises at least. So yeah, I think that was a good discussion, David, and yeah, well worth people listening to when you have time. But also, since I just hinted at it, there were some issues with the .de CCTLD last week. Plenty of coverage, particularly in Germany, obviously. Turned out they were seems to be being caused by DNSSEC key change. And there's a write-up from DENIC as well as covered by various others. Coincidentally, I assume, Jeff Houston has just published an article that looks at the KSK key roll that's underway for DNSSEC. So that's quite impressive timing, unless he managed to rattle off quite a longish piece at very short notice, or he had it in his back pocket for some reason. But yeah, so as I say, if you use .de for anything, you weren't for a short while last week. But in fairness to the DENIC, they seem to have got on top of it in just over 3 hours, which is pretty good to locate and solve the problem.
Andrew, I just wanted to make a comment about that. So there was a lot of discussion on both at the center meeting that I was at last week and also in the DNS OARC Mattermost chat about the DNIC outage. And I noted that a couple of the big open resolver operators said in the OARC chat that they had put in a negative trust anchor for DNIC during the outage so that people could still access their domains. And I asked someone from DNIC, I said, have you considered putting it in your playbook if you have an outage to ask for, contact a few people at, the Google and Cloudflare and Quad9 and so on and ask for this. And they said, no, we think that if the DNSSEC validation fails, the right response is to basically fail hard. Anyway, I thought that was just an interesting topic to discuss, whether you should paper over an outage for the benefit of the users or make sure that you, if you go insecure that you.
I mean, it's a dangerous precedent to set to start putting in negative trust tankers all over the place every time there's an outage, isn't there? I can see why you would do it, but it's also a dangerous thing to start doing it as normal.
Right. And, I hadn't thought of that, of course, when I suggested it. I just thought, oh, look how helpful these guys are. Why don't you just ask them directly? But anyway, I don't have a specific opinion about it. I just wanted to mention it because I thought it's a good conversation to have.
Yeah, definitely.
I was curious whether any malicious actors took advantage of that and tried to, like, when they knew that DNSSEC wasn't being validated, like, oh, we can hop in and, I don't know, forge some DNS requests. It'd be hard to tell, right?
Yeah, almost impossible, I think.
But I mean, if I was running an international crime ring, I think I might hop off there. If I was doing that sort of thing anyway, and capable of doing man-in-the-middle attacks or cache poisoning or whatever, then that's exactly, I think there was a high chance of some increased activity at that point.
I think it's a non-zero chance, but I don't think I think there's other attack surfaces that are either easier to attack.
Yeah, true.
But to Vicky's point, though, if you knew as a policy that people would do that in the event of an outage, then it could be an attack vector.
Yeah.
I mean, in this case, probably not, because it was completely unexpected and so on. But if that became a known response to a fail, then it could be problematic, I guess.
Well, on the flip side, if you had asked for somebody to put in an NTA, then you also could notify them when you wanted them to remove it. Since DNIC wasn't really involved in the decision at all, Anyway, I don't have I just think it's an interesting.
I mean, maybe there should be some standards work done on the protocol for when a failing large authoritative server operator wants an NTA putting in. There's some kind of standard protocol of how that communication is done.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could assume by default, if they have signed their zones, they mean to have them validated. So unless they ask, it seems like maybe you shouldn't put in an NTA. But anyway.
Yes, it's when the sort of user experience battles with potential security problem, which you prioritise. I can see sort of Eric's comment about the DNS must flow in the chat.
Because I mean, if DNIC had been compromised, then they would not want people to be putting NTAs in.
Yeah.
Right. So actually, Eric has suggested that might be a good BOF discussion at Edinburgh. Probably we shouldn't. Maybe I'll look and see who's coming to Edinburgh and see if there's anybody from DNET coming. It would seem to be rude to do that without them.
Yeah.
Yes, as they've got the most recent hands-on experience, that would be valid, wouldn't it? Really? Yeah. Good idea. Anyway, other stuff. On the RAR things, interesting piece in Circle ID on Afrinic, which I mean, I've mentioned this a few times over the last few weeks. This has come up a lot over the last several months with articles that Circular ID have picked up. This one was quite curious, which talked about various operators in Africa receiving messages about a number of resource society shield program, with a power of attorney framework to safeguard IP resources. Anyway, Emmanuel Vitas followed through, investigated the organisation that had supposedly sent out these messages. It appears that they're located in the same building as someone who was directly associated with a lot of the governance attacks or governance challenges rather faced by Afrinic a couple of years ago, with the sort of an attempted takeover of Afrinic by a particular individual and company. Again, longish article, but with a suggestion that this was a sort of a further attempt to sort of do an end run around some of the governance changes to try and still influence Afrinic. A multi-year campaign from Hong Kong, it would appear. Also, at the same time, since the RIR governance processes are being updated, I think largely as a consequence of the problems with Afrinic, coincidentally last week there was an update on what the latest sort of state of play is with those proposed changes. So that's the sort of piece underneath. And then probably the final one, I'll labour the point on a little bit. Article 19 published a piece on the DNS must enable expression, not silence it. So we talked before on this call about mandated content blocking through the DNS. This is sort of similar, not exactly the same, because it's also covering domain suspension, so not just content filtering, but actual domain suspensions via the registries. So just really continuing that debate about when it might be appropriate to do that. But also, I think perhaps the interesting piece in the report, it does acknowledge that the multi-stakeholder process can be slow. So although ICANN is looking at further ways to address DNS abuse, as some of you will be aware, a number of governments seem to be losing patience with that and are stepping in with their own local changes. Which, funny enough, I plan to talk about at the next ICANN meeting in Seville as well, about whether governments are losing patience with the lack of change, and whether that is posing a very real risk to the model. So Article 19, interesting piece. Other things I probably won't spend so much time on. So Joe Rice Jones, middle one there. So title was "I ditched Quad 9's filtering for Control D, and the visibility difference is massive." In reality, it's just sort of highlighting some of the benefits of Control D as a paid-for alternative to an open resolver. Although Quad 9's mentioned in the title, it could have been any open resolver, I think, pretty much. It wasn't really about Quad 9, it was more about the extra features you might get were you to opt for the Control D software. And then the bottom one, just going back to our sort of default on or default off. Gavin Phillips wrote a piece about options in Windows 11 to stop it from falling back to regular DNS over port 53 if encrypted DNS isn't available. And it just puts there almost in a footnote in the article that may cause problems, so you need to be mindful that everything will stop if you switch on that option. So yes, it's more secure, but there are consequences. Probably wasn't the best article overall, if I'm honest, but yeah, I was just intrigued to see that take on things. Yeah, it's sort of not especially interesting. So we move on. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. Definitely not DNS related. Probably the only one I mentioned. Sort of things seem to be gaining momentum, certainly in parts of Europe, around social media bans for mainly under 16s. So there's a sort of discussion, one of the EU politicians suggesting it should be more than just yes or no. But that does seem to be the direction of travel at the moment in a whole bunch of countries for various reasons. Again, this is all the sort of pressure on politicians to be seen to be doing something, and absent any good options, they'll still do something anyway, probably, which is concerning. But there you are. But yeah, loads of interesting stuff, at least to me. The only other one I will mention towards the bottom of the page, questioning the IPv8 proposal, article in the Ripe Labs blog. Which I think that the conclusion seemed to be some interesting ideas, but overall it's completely insufficient as written, would be my take on it. But various supposed improvements on IPv6 are knocking around. I've seen IPv8. I think IPv10 has kicked around a few times in the ITF mailing lists as well. I'm not sure necessarily that 10 is better than 8. But different people have got ideas on how they could improve the underlying protocol. But well, given that it's taken 20 years to get to 50% take up of IPv6, it's maybe overly ambitious, but there you are. And yes, as Patrick quite right out, depends on the base whether 10 is better than 8. Yes, very true. Anyway, so yeah, lots of interesting things in my view. More importantly, perhaps, if you want to present at the finished NOG in a couple of months' time, or 6 weeks or so's time, you've got till end of today to get your presentation in. So that's the deadline for that. And also, if you want to go to OARC, well, you've got till Friday basically, or was that Saturday, to register. So that's probably no great surprise. That's coming up. I haven't highlighted it midway down the page. Also a reminder that ITF in Vienna in July, the super early rate closes on the 1st of June. So you've got a couple of weeks or so if you want to take advantage of the super early rate. And then other deadlines later on. There is a NIST, top of the screen there, NIST consultation on the sort of TLS at the moment, and a deadline of mid-July, so it's a way off, but probably needs a bit more thought on the content of any responses. So I thought it was just worth a quick mention. So a question in the chat from David. Yes, this is a record attendance, as I understand it, for DNS OARC. It's often less, well, it can be less than 100. Certainly in-person attendance, I don't think it's ever been as high as 155 previously. So this is a new record in Edinburgh, based on what chatting to some of the OARC team have said anyway. I think previously 120 was a good number, so 155 is very good. There is there's a top DNS call in a today. Actually, it's probably already happened. Apologies for that. There's introducing the Trusted Notify network next week, and about DNS abuse coming up with ICANN later on this month. But obviously the main things at the moment are OARC and RIPE from this weekend onwards in terms of stuff coming up. But there's loads of things still being added to the agenda between now and the end of July. So loads of stuff to attract your attention. Finally, from me, just a reminder, as I said at the start of the call, our plan is we'll do this call next week, as a hybrid call from Edinburgh. So if you're there for RIPE on Monday, so make sure you ask me what room I've managed to hopefully beg, steal or borrow from RIPE to do the call from on Monday afternoon, and you can join us for that live, and then we can socialise afterwards, which should be good. And apart from that, I think we're on any other business. So let me finally stop sharing, stop talking at you, and pause for thought. I think I picked up most things on the chat. As Vicky says, it's the location's kind of accessible and also helpful. It coincides, as it does occasionally, with RIPE, so you get 2 for 1 on your travel in terms of going to OARC and staying on for RIPE, which makes it pretty time efficient, which should be good. But anything from anyone else? Are we doing a WhatsApp group? We'll probably repurpose a generic IETF WhatsApp group for the purposes. So if anyone wants to be on the WhatsApp group that isn't, message me, and we can add you to the WhatsApp group. Sorry, David, you got your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. Andrew, I was just wanting to know if you would be interested and available to join a special edition of the Defenders Log podcast that I would like to record at the venue on Sunday morning. So it would be after the Underminer presentation on Saturday. I will have Andreas Taute there. He's been a previous guest, and he's also a frequent guest here. And yourself and one other person, so like a 4-person recording. If you're open to it, I'm thinking the time window would work. If you're an early bird, is 7:30 a.m. on that Sunday, the 17th.
Yeah, I mean, I'm there. That would be a good reason to not overindulge on the Saturday night on the social. So,
well, I noticed that the social ends up only being closed at 8 p.m. or so it should be okay.
It's when the beer tokens run out, I think, or it has been traditionally. And I do literally mean beer tokens, because as you'll probably know, I think you've been to them before, of course, David, they typically give you tickets to exchange for beer or other beverages. I think in theory we're meant to get 2 tickets each, or that's been usual, but if you're nice to the staff, further tickets might be available, allegedly.
Okay.
You should be all right for early mornings without the malign influence of James from Ofcom as well.
This is true. James is not there, so and he's not on this call to defend himself either. That sounds good. Good idea to do it at that time when people are gathered. So that should be fun. And I saw also Tom put a comment about Control D comparing it with free open resolvers is probably not a very fair comparison generally, and that's probably true. I think if you're paying for something, you better have more features than the free thing, otherwise.
And the free thing seems to be like the free thing is an open resolver you point your DNS at, and the paid for thing is like install this bunch of software on a Windows device and shit. What do you know? You get to learn a bit more about what goes on that Windows device.
Yes.
Well, colour me surprised.
Otherwise, why would you pay for the thing?
Yes.
How stupid would you be to do that? So yeah, as I say, I thought it was a bit of a thin comparison, and certainly with that reference Quad 9 specifically, it didn't really seem to be about Quad 9 at all, but hey ho. Anyway, all right, look, unless anyone's got anything else you want to mention, we're just on the hour. So hopefully we'll see a bunch of people in Edinburgh, which will be fantastic, either over the weekend or through next week. So, let's meet in person, which will be good. And yeah, I'll see why NordVPN has been playing up in the meantime. Very odd, because it's normally just quiet in the background, but there you are. So apologies for the interruptions, but yeah, hopefully that was useful, and there's sort of signposts you to a few interesting things on the agenda for next week. So have a great week, everyone, and see you, or many of you, in Edinburgh. Bye all.
Thanks, Andrew.